You want to be more productive, accomplish more things in your life, do things more consistently? I think that all of these things are actually red herrings. I think that at the root of all of these, the most important question to ask is, what is your relationship like with yourself? Does it feel like a constant battle? Every time you try to do something, do you have to fight against yourself in order to get yourself to do it? I can totally understand why it would make it hard to be productive, accomplish more in your life, and do things consistently when you're in this constant battle with yourself. It sounds exhausting. My name's Sean. I'm a mental health coach. I mentored under a Harvard-affiliated psychiatrist, a former Amazon VP turned career coach, and a licensed therapist. And I have over 1,000 ratings with a 98% satisfaction score. And today, what I want to break down is this idea that our relationship with ourselves is actually not so different from our relationship with other people. Most people that I meet treat their relationship with themselves fundamentally different from how they treat their relationships with other people. So today we're going to break down what it is like to have healthy relationships with other people, some tools that you can use to have healthy relationships with other people, and then ways to practically and actually apply those tools to yourself. Because the problem is that, you'll hear this sort of thing all the time where people will say, well, you wouldn't hold someone else to that standard. Why do you hold yourself to that standard? But what that ends up doing is it actually just makes you beat yourself up more. Because then you're like, yeah, why can't I treat myself like everybody else? And then you're beating yourself up, and it just kills productivity, kills your ability to accomplish more in life, kills your ability to be consistent. So instead, we're going to start by just talking about working with other people, improving your relationships with other people, and some tools to do that. So if you want to improve your relationship with other people, the number one tool that you have in your arsenal is communication, because essentially that is how we connect to other people, whether it's through our bodies, whether it's through what we're saying. The way that we connect to other people is through communication. So communication is where we're going to start. We're going to start by talking about reflective listening. Now, reflective listening is going to feel very foreign at first. It is not an intuitive process. But essentially, what reflective listening is that when somebody is talking to you, you are going to speak your understanding of what they are saying back to them. This is going to do a couple of things. The first thing is that it is going to show that you are listening. It's going to show them that you are understanding what they are saying. The other thing that it's going to do is it is also going to help them to understand what they are saying. I know that sounds sort of weird, so let me explain. Did you ever play that game called Broken Telephone, where you whisper to someone next to you, everyone's sitting in a circle, and you whisper to someone next to you, and then they whisper that same message to someone next to them. And by the time it gets all the way around the circle, the message is completely different than how it started out. Communication is sort of like that in general. We don't really think about it, but when we are communicating something, the message that is in our head, as it gets translated into words, changes a little bit, right? We don't always say exactly what we mean because we don't always have the words to say it. And then as it travels out of our mouth into the other person's ear, then their ears hear, they might not even hear all the words correctly. And then it goes into their mind and it gets filtered through all of their experiences. And so in that filtering process, it actually gets changed again. And then when you speak it back to them, you have that translation process again. It goes from your mind to words. So you have that translation process again. And then it goes from your mouth to their ears. And so what you say back to them is actually at least slightly different message than what they said to you. Now, in telephone, this is in Broken Telephone, this is a bad thing, right? Because it's we're trying to get the message consistently all the way around the circle. But in reflective listening, it's actually a good thing. And the reason for that is because if you are reflecting back something slightly different than what it is that they said to you, it is going to have, because of your experience and all that translation, it is going to have a slightly different interpretation, a slightly different lens than how they originally viewed it. And so in talking with people and then reflectively listening, you make them feel heard and understood, which is really important. But then you also like help them to like think differently and like discover new insights. And that's really a connecting thing. Like think about somebody that you talk to when you're like having a hard time, and they help you to like discover some insight that you haven't thought of before. Think of what like a positive experience that is for people. And so by doing this, by just reflectively listening, you help people to form a better relationship with you, because they're like, "Oh, you know what? Like when I talk to that person, I feel like they really understand me, and I also like I get a lot out of the conversation." So that's the first thing, is reflective listening. Thing number two is asking open-ended questions. Now, all of these actually sort of have like a similar goal, which is to help someone feel heard and understood, and to sort of like give them room to explore. Because, like people like talking about themselves and learning about themselves. And the great thing is that when you do these techniques and you help someone to talk about themselves and learn about themselves, the likelihood that they will want to hear and understand you and help you learn about yourself increases. So, open-ended questions are exactly what they sound like. They are questions that are open-ended, which just means not yes or no. I guess technically there is also multiple choice. Like there's like open-ended questions, multiple choice, and then yes or no questions. And I think it's sort of like a spectrum. Like yes or no questions are the most closed-ended, multiple choice a little bit less, and then completely open-ended. And the reason that we want to go with open-ended questions is because it allows for more exploration. So when you ask a yes or no question, it's just yes or no. There's not much room to explore. You just say, are you feeling like this? No. And like, that's it. Now, sometimes people will expound further, but by asking an open-ended question like, how are you feeling? It actually allows them to have a lot more room to explore. And in that exploration, they can come to more understanding about themselves, and they can connect with you more because they can talk about all sorts of stuff that you can then connect to in your own experience. And the last one is validation. Now, be careful, because a lot of people mistake what validation is. Validation is actually not something that is very common in communication nowadays. So a lot of people think, if I'm talking with a friend and they say, "Oh, I'm just so upset about, I don't know, my boyfriend just broke up with me," and then you say, "Hey, don't worry, it's okay." A lot of people think that that is validation. That's not validation. That's actually reassurance. You are trying to reassure them that even though this thing happened, it's going to be okay. Now, unfortunately, that technique is actually not super effective when it comes to helping people to feel heard and understood. Because what it actually does when you say, "Hey, don't worry, it'll be okay," is it actually sort of like squishes their feelings. It says, "No, no, 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 don't feel what you're feeling. It'll be okay. I want you to be okay," instead of allowing room for their emotions. So what validation does is it actually allows room for their experience and their emotions. So the way to validate, there's a very simple two-step formula. Step one is to tell the person what they are feeling makes sense. And step two is to tell them why it makes sense. And the little sub-step after that is, if you don't know why, ask an open-ended question. We're like combining techniques now. So step one, tell the person what they're feeling makes sense. Hey, it makes a lot of sense that you are sad right now, and then tell them why it makes sense. Step two, because your boyfriend just broke up with you, and and anyone would be sad about losing their boyfriend. One of my favorite descriptions of validation is that when validation is done correctly, it feels like a warm blanket. And I think that's a very accurate description, because when you feel heard and understood and validated, it's like warm and fuzzy inside. So the way that I sort of view validation is that when we have emotions, they will sort of like blow up like a balloon, right? They sort of get like bigger and bigger and bigger as we experience those emotions. And what validation does is it helps to actually like deflate that balloon. As someone like makes us feel heard and understood, then those emotions start to deflate back down. And when you can offer that to someone, when you can communicate with someone in a way that makes them feel heard and understood and helps to deflate that emotional balloon, it is something that will increase the goodness of your relationship So much. Can't even describe. Because imagine for a second that you're in a disagreement with somebody. And it's, it's like a partner or something. So like I'm in a disagreement with my wife, for instance. And my wife and I are arguing about something. And rather than me saying, like, this is so stupid, you don't understand, you're just wrong about this thing. Imagine if I said something like, hey, I can totally understand why you feel that way because of X, Y, and Z. Imagine what a difference that would make in the communication between me and that person in that relationship. It would be such a fundamentally different way of communicating than how most people communicate when they are in some sort of disagreement, which ultimately is where relationships are the most strained, right? Like anyone can have a good relationship when things are going great. What's hard is when people are in conflict. So just to recap real quick, the reason that people have so much problem with their productivity, accomplishing more in life, being consistent, all those things that you always hear about people wanting to do, maybe you even want to do those things, they're all symptoms. They're all red herrings. They're not the actual problem. The actual problem, in my experience, working with 35 plus clients a week, is that people's relationship with themselves is fundamentally different from their relationship with other people. Or actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's actually more similar and people just need to work on their relationships with other people. So that being said, the first step in starting this process is we're actually not going to worry about your relationship with yourself at all. We're going to worry about your relationship with other people. So your homework is to go out and start practicing these skills. You have open-ended questions, you have reflective listening, and you have validation. Start practicing these skills with other people. Because you know that thing that people always say where they're like, you can't love other people until you love yourself. It's crap. It's total crap. It's not total crap. There is some legitimacy to it, but at its most basic level, it is actually much easier to love other people than to love yourself. Loving yourself is actually like really hard for a lot of people for reasons that we will talk about, but by practicing with other people, it's going to be a whole lot easier, right? Like it's a whole lot easier for someone else to validate you than for you to validate yourself, right? So that's what we're going to do is we're going to go out and we're going to practice these communication skills with other people and see how they affect your relationships. Okay. Come back when you have practiced those steps. If you want to do like a quick check-in on your mental health, there is a quick free 2-minute quiz over on my website, ostaracoaching.com. I'll leave like the link in the description or whatever it is. The other thing is that I offer coaching services. So if you're like going through this process and you are like stuck, you really want help, I can help guide you through this process and help, like discover these different parts of yourself, all that sort of thing. So if you'd like to work together, go over to my website, ostaracoaching.com. I'll link in the description and join the waiting list.